Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. I'm a doula in Washoe County, Nevada, a Medicaid provider, a lactation educator, childbirth educator, and mom of 18. You can find me and connect on doulainreno.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm the host, Jennifer Campbell. And today I'm here with Katherine McCord. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you.
We coordinated our outfits and our backgrounds today. We didn't, but we did. Look at that.
Subconsciously. Across the ether.
That's what happened. I want you to jump in. You have a very unique story, and I want you to jump in wherever it makes sense to you and start sharing your story.
Okay, I can just do that. I can just introduce myself. That's perfectly fine with that. So, hi, everyone. I'm Katherine McCord. I currently work in neurodiversity. I have several neuroscience certifications, and I also run a people operations consulting business, which is the human side of HR. And I speak and teach internationally, and I just published my first book in literally 2 days. Like I wrote it and published it in 2 days.
How did you wait?
We'll get to that. We will get to that.
Okay. I'll stop. I have the link.
We will get.
So
No. You're good. We'll get to that. So, but my journey started like so early in my little life, right? So, and you can interrupt me at any time, by the way, as I'm telling you this. So, my parents, I was the first by 10 years. All right, there's two of us. I was the first by 10 years, and when I was born, it became clear very early on that I was a little differenty. Okay. Like just very, very early on. So the first thing that my mother noticed was, and my father around the same time, was that I had unusual opposition to either a lot of noise, certain noises, things like that. Like no baby likes like tons of noise around them, right? But I just had an unnatural, like, okay, no, noise is not acceptable to me, right? And of any kind. And as I grew older, we figured out that turned into misophonia. So I was pretty much born with that. That's a condition where there are sounds or combinations of sounds that actually make your neural function disrupt. And it causes all kinds of agitation, physical problems, cognitive disruption, things like that. The next thing was that it became very, first of all, I was sassy. Like we just talk about that for a minute. I was the sassiest little kid. Like I had so many opinions, and my parents gave me all the autonomy. I was my own human from the time I was very small, right? And they owned that and they embraced it and they steered into it. And some examples of that were that I went to work with my mom one time when I was two, okay. I was seated next to a man in the waiting room, who I assume, since she worked in HR recruiting, was there trying to get a job. And I was apparently speaking to him and he wouldn't speak back. And I looked up and said, "Excuse me, can you please reply to me? I'm speaking to you at 2." That's what I came up with. And then, I just stayed sassy. My mother and I used to play interview, which led into my career, right? And we used to play interview in HR, and I fired her when I was 6 years old.
I'm sure my kids would want to do that too.
No, not as my mother, like as whatever job. Yeah, as whatever job it was that she supposedly had at my company that I had invented. My father also took me to work, and he works at the collegiate level. He's also a musician, and so I had a lot of exposure to education, right, and to being curious and public speaking. And he also did a lot of work around the theater, right. So I was very comfortable on stage from a small age. And my grandfather and my grandmother owned a business at one point, so I was always around like entrepreneurship and career and education, and this was just my upbringing. When my OCD kicked in when I was about 5, I think, is when I first noticed it, and it got more progressively obvious as time went on. And my parents were so amazing. They just, every new thing that happened with me, they just steered into it, and they just went, "Okay, so this is cool, so here's how you can turn this into a strength. And then here's how we can help teach you how to accommodate yourself." Right? Like that was always the attitude. Always.
Holy cow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And for the first time parents, like what in what universe, right? And they were extraordinary. And um, even with my bipolar, like when that kicked in, like so I got um, a semi-diagnosis when I was very young because it was way before the age that you were allowed to officially diagnose with, which at the time was called manic depression.
Yeah.
And yeah, it wasn't called bipolar yet. And my parents, even then, they just steered into it, and they were like, okay, so here's how you can use some of these things, right? These things that are happening to you, and here's some research. You know, they helped me research and learn about things, and they helped me find the right mental health professional that would teach me to take care of myself, because they're like, we don't want to just drug her into oblivion, right? We want to teach her how to work with what's going on with her, right? And it took years. Like, I'm not going to say this was an easy journey, okay, but it worked. And now I've never medicated for longer than a couple of months at a time for
Wow.
my bipolar. Yeah.
My
And I have,
stepfather was manic, and he was the first person
yeah.
in the US to be put on lithium for it. And I saw him off of it a couple
Mhm.
times where he forgot to take it, and it was not he was not the same person.
Yeah.
It was very severe. So, I mean, just having that little snippet in my background and knowing how
Yeah.
your parents handled it is astonishing.
And I like to be very specific about the fact that, to kind of to your point, first of all, everybody's journey is different. I am not knocking medication. I'm going to be extremely clear about that. Um, but it is important to have support from the time you're little, which is why I'm bringing it up on this show, right? And to have
Yeah.
those tools from the time you're little. It's not okay to start if you start as adult. That's great for you, but you're already way behind, right? I was given these tools from the time I was a child. It was just part of my growing up experience. And so that makes all the difference. So parents, like, that's my number one communication to you is, well, two things. A, support your humans as they are, not how you picture them to be. And number two, make sure that you're giving them the tools, not just the medications, right? I
Oh
mean,
my
medications
gosh.
are fine,
Yes.
but teach them how. And a lot of these things are strengths, by the way. So fast forward, we're gonna get to that part now. So fast forward, I keep having all these things. I have a total of 8 disabilities now, by the way, between neurodiversities and between, which just means a medically visible or diagnosable difference in how the brain processes. So, like, everything from autism, ADHD, dyslexia to cerebral palsy and MS over to the mental health spectrum. That's neurodiversity. So to fast forward, I have a total of 8 disabilities, which, like, I've literally cut my doctor off from any more diagnoses. I'm like, no, ma'am. Like, you just have to roll it into something else that already exists. This isn't allowed. Um, and I have all these tools, and people think that I got into the work I did because of me, and that's not true. I had a
Interesting.
great experience. I was fine. It was when I figured out that other people weren't fine that I was like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't okay. And then
Okay.
I also started seeing, and my work in the workplace, right, in HR and all that, that we just weren't taking care of humans. And some of it had to do with their diversities, and some of it was just, this has been terribly designed. This does
Yeah.
not work, and we need to
Yep.
fix it, right? And so I set out to do that. I do a lot of research and all this, and now, fast forward, I'm an international speaker and teacher. Um, my first time on a big stage, I had 2 seizures that morning, forgot my whole speech, and got up and talked about that had happened. And I was across the world, by the way. I had no resources anywhere near me. Like, I was across the world. I was not in the United States. And um, I got up and talked about it to thousands of people. Like, hey, this is what just happened to me. And this is why I have a phone in front of me, because I literally cannot remember anything right now. And it was cool. And so now I get the privilege of teaching others, both in the professional realm, right, with HR and leadership and all of that, and also on a personal level, how to, what I call, design universally, which is to design with everybody in mind and with flexibility in mind, so that everyone can function and or work and or do school or whatever it is you need them to do, um, in a healthy, happy manner, which, by the way, increases your productivity up to 33%. And it makes everything function in a much better way. And I also teach people how to break their ego mechanism and respond in curiosity. So that's my joy now. Like that's from the gift my parents gave me of showing me how to take care of myself and how to appreciate myself. And now, I've done the research, and I know that according to Johns Hopkins and the National Institute of Health and National Library of Medicine and all of this, that these things that I have, the OCD and the bipolar and the, I don't know what's great about misophonia, but apparently something is, that they inherently come with benefits. It's fact now. Like this is medical
Right.
fact. Yeah,
Yeah.
they come with it's because you're designed to be strong, right? So just like our body, like if you lose your sight, for instance, your hearing gets better, right? Like we all kind
Yep.
of know that. What's the same thing with your neural processes? So yes, there may be a struggle here, but there's strength over here. So learning to balance all that, and it all started with phenomenal parents and
Oh
that
my
did
gosh.
an incredible job.
I I'm so grateful for that because that's not always what we hear, right?
No,
People trying to figure out how to be parents or adults or in the workforce or make a living, and how much that was impacted by not having great parents. And that's without 8 diagnoses. But I love, yes, everything's a strength, everything. And the biggest
yeah.
thing, the place I think we see this the most is when people go through something hard, a divorce, a car accident,
Mhm.
death, something that's more normalized in society.
Right.
And, like out of the ashes, the phoenix reborn sort of thing. Like your struggles will ultimately become your strengths if you utilize them
If you
that
let
way.
them, yeah. And
Right.
and
And
honestly, like I don't struggle with some of this. That's what surprises people. Like I love my bipolar. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the whole wide world. Like people are like, "Oh, wouldn't you give it up?" No. No, you couldn't pay me millions of dollars to give this up because with it, I was able to write and publish a book in 2 days because of my bipolar, specifically because of that. Because when I'm in a manic phase, I can just go a million miles an hour, which
yes.
I'm fast anyway. But like you take my already sped up version of myself and increase it even more, and I'm hyper creative when I'm like that, right? And then also in my depressive cycle, I'm able to complete mundane tasks that would normally irritate the bejesus out of me. And I'm also able to be creative in a different way. It's a different type of creativity that sinks in. So I wouldn't trade it. And even my OCD, which can really make me nuts. It really can. Like if I think the best, if you've ever seen the show Scrubs, there is an episode with Michael J. Fox that was the best representation of OCD because it shows the compulsion of it. That it's not like, oh, I'm just a little picky about this. No, it's compulsory behavior. But because of that, I can compulsively learn and research. I can compulsively
Oh,
work
wow.
on a project to completion, right? So it's that same thing, right? So it has inherent benefits and inherent disaster as well if it's not properly managed. And that's where you have to learn to self accommodate as well.
There's a show about like where pairs of people have to go on like this scavenger hunt and complete things and be first. I can't remember what the name of it is, but there was a couple that Holderness family that my daughter and I watch like on YouTube, and they were on this show. And there was one task. There was this task where they had to put together this cut up piece of paper that was massive, like floor size puzzle. And he said, I just need everybody to be quiet because this is where my ADHD shines. Just if everybody can be
Yeah.
quiet and I can just do it. And then you watched him talk himself through the process. And it was
Hmm.
absolutely fascinating because I
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
have thought about things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I
Yeah.
love these examples of how you can take whatever that is that can be challenging sometimes and flip
Yeah.
it. Do you wake up do you feel your phases of manic and depressive changing? Is it like, will you
Oh,
wake
yeah.
up and see where you're at that day?
Oh, yeah. I can
What's
feel it throughout the day as things are changing and shifting. So I have bipolar ones. I have long down, long, perfectly in the middle, and then long ups, right? So the perfectly in the middle is kind of stage one, or just that my baseline, right, is just kind of stage one. And then the cycle will start. And typically I go up and then come down is how my
okay?
cycles go. I go up and then down. Um, and so I can feel it coming. And I learned, right? That was part of that self-mapping and that
Yes.
self-regulation, right? And I started learning grounding work, and I have tools, like I have tons of tools behind me of that I use to ground, to work with the different energies that I have. I have music that I
Mm-hmm.
specifically listen to that will help regulate my body chemicals. Um, and I've learned to put certain safety measures in place when I'm manic, because I will otherwise like spin like an insane person. So I have to put certain, safety measures in place for myself. Um, that I don't need the rest of the time. But it's just, yeah, you feel it and you can learn to work with it. And I think even with children, as a society as a whole, we tend to dismiss what comes out of a kid's mouth, which I've never understood. Like, they're little geniuses, first of all. They're just magnificent. Um, but and there's just unfiltered truth, which has always been one of my favorite things in the world about kids. Um, but learning to listen to the things that come out of their mouth. My little sister is now, she graduated from school and became got her master's in psychology and works with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And she always talks about that. She's like, we just listen. They tell us exactly what it is, but it's never the way we process it, right? So, for
Yep.
instance, she and I were talking about one child that we both know who kept telling her parents, she had two identical pairs of shoes, okay, but one was blue and one was yellow. And if they tried to put the yellow ones on, she would scream and say that they hurt. Exact same shoe, exact same shoe.
Okay.
But the blue one, she was fine. Well, we both suspect that she has autism. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks in the autistic community prefer, not all, but a lot prefer certain colors to others, and it stresses them out to wear other colors. Well, a small child can't tell you, this color stresses me out. These are the things that I'm feeling, right? They have limited vocabulary. So she's just saying, this hurts. Stop it. Like, because she feels anxiety, tension. She probably does feel some physical pain from that stress, right? So she's saying, this hurts. That's the way that she's saying it. So a lot of parents would look at that and go, well, this shoe doesn't hurt you if that one doesn't. Well, hold on. Why are they saying this? You know what I mean? So sometimes you have to kind of stop and realize, this child's vocabulary is smaller than mine. What are they trying to communicate to me that I'm not hearing, right? Or that I'm not receiving, or that's different from my experience?
Right. Yeah, because we do take things, I think adults are more literal
Hmm.
and kids are saying things figuratively, like
Yes.
how they feel or see them, not in a literal sense, which is very
Right.
true. I want to You said something before that I want to clarify. You talked about helping HR departments write language that can make in any situation people will be happy, and I'm like, I don't even understand how that's remotely possible.
Oh yeah, so it's not just language, it's everything. It's the whole design. So you so it's an old concept. So universal design is an old concept, for architecture and IT. This has
Okay.
been around for forever. And it literally just means design so that everyone can use the thing. All right, whatever the thing is that, everybody can use it. And you design flexibility because you assume that you've missed something. And that at some point somebody won't be able to use it properly. So you have to redesign it in some way. So there has to be inherent flexibility and sustainability as well. So
Mhm.
in the workplace, right, the first place that we kind of start with this is by being broad scope, right? And I teach, and actually I do this with individuals too.
Okay.
Everything should be mission focused. Okay.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
let's use the parenting example. If the mission is get the kid dressed, how we get there doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
If brother or sister needs to help, cool. If they want to wear some crazy outfit that looks, like they got put in a dryer and tumbled around for a while and came out with whatever stuck to them, fine. All right, the kid's dressed, right? Here we go. That's the mission.
Yep.
Let's go. Um, and so being mission focused, that's the thing. Um, and then the flexibility, right? So, okay, so this thing worked this time, it doesn't work this time. Now we're going to change it up. And all parents know this, and this is the same for individuals in the workplace. What works for one will not work for the other, right? So
Right.
you have to be willing to go, okay, so we're going to do this for this one. Here we go. Now we're juggling. So that's the basic concept. So design broadly, be mission focused. Everything comes back to the mission. Everything else can be flexible. The next thing is to learn to break the biological ego mechanism. So we all have in our primitive brain a biological ego mechanism. And it's not ego as people think of it. People think ego means that you think, oh, I'm the best person ever, nobody is better than me. That's not it. The ego is there to make sure that we are right, because right is safe according to
Mm.
our brain. So I actually teach organizations and individuals both to learn to recognize that response, to move it to the conscious brain, take it out of the primitive process and move it to the conscious process, and therefore be able to easily turn it off and then respond with curiosity and respond more effectively, which allows you to receive information in different ways than how you process, to find better solutions, et cetera, et cetera. And it also makes you a lot healthier person, because when we respond with our primitive brain, stress chemicals are released. So adrenaline's released, and sometimes too much dopamine, and that makes you unhealthy. It can even create heart palpitations, gut
Hmm.
problems, all kinds of stuff, right? But when we move
Yeah.
it to the conscious brain and we learn to turn that off, we start to get oxytocin and serotonin. So we become much healthier, happier people. Same thing in the workplace. And then I tell everybody, and I tell parents this too, I tell individuals this with their partners, for themselves, get rid of this accommodations nonsense. Let's stop talking about accommodations and just start talking about standard options. The Department of Labor teaches that 54% of accommodations are free and tons more are extremely cheap. So why are we not just giving people options? If you want to sit on a yoga ball and
Right.
bounce around because you have ADHD instead of, sitting in a regular chair, who the frick cares? Go for it. Live your best life. If you want to walk around while you're talking, working, thinking, whatever it is, go for it. God bless, right? Like whatever it is that you need to do that. Incorporating training that actually uses all three learning styles. Same thing with
Yeah.
kids. Why are we
Yeah.
why are we teaching kids with one learning style? That makes
I
no sense.
do
Like
not know.
literally none. And it's not hard, by the way, to incorporate all three. It's not. I even have a very good friend who is a national education consultant, and we talk about this all the time. She's like, "Yeah, I don't get it." She's like, "It's not
I
that
don't
hard."
get it
It's
either.
like, it's baffling.
And so you mentioned that your book was written in 2 days because you were in
Yeah,
that manic phase. So you had it ready to
yeah.
go and like you planning it, right? To do that.
No, no.
Oh,
I just
this is
decided and I
better.
did it. so so okay, rewind. So a friend of mine who has ADHD, by the way,
Yeah.
she she wrote her book in 2 days and then published it on the third. Okay. And she had been kind of planning it for a while, but then that's how it was actually done. She goes, look, I'm ADHD. If I do anything else in between this, it's never going to get done. So I just have to sit down, do it, and go. And so I got an invite. I'm doing a speaking engagement in a couple of weeks for HR Florida, which is a big SHRM. It's a big deal. It's a big state conference. And I got an email going, hey, if you have a book, we can do a book signing and you have to sign up within a week. And I was like, you know what? I have a couple of days free. I'll write a book. And I've
Oh
been
my
meaning to do that
gosh.
anyway. And I was like, what topic do I want to use? You know what? I'm doing a lot with universal design right now. That's my big program for my work. Let's do it on that. And so I literally sat down and wrote a book and put some resources, designed a cover, and got it up on Amazon in 2 days. Less less than 48 hours technically. And it's very short. Like it's 75 pages. And then it also has some resources in it and stuff. And it's designed to give you the basics without giving away the whole thing for free, right? Because I still want you to hire me.
Right.
But it does give the basic principles and it does get the ball rolling, right? It really does. And it does teach a few of the concepts very specifically. So it is still helpful, but it was so fun. And now I'm getting to do the book signing.
Oh
So
my
that's
gosh. I adore you. This is crazy. Tell me how it's not about that there are necessarily 8 diagnoses, but tell me how those 8 diagnoses they've helped you in lots of ways. How has it made it challenging in relationships? And then I want to talk about your biological and family journey
oh yeah, we
into
will.
parenthood for sure. However you
Let's
want
talk
to
about it.
do that. Yes.
So first of all, I have oh God, I have so much wrong with me. My body, this is a true story. I was getting, when I was 28 years old, I was getting Aflac insurance. Okay.
Okay.
And Aflac called me because they were convinced they had my age wrong because of what was wrong with me.
Oh,
Like when they got my list of health conditions, they were completely convinced that there was no way I was that young, which I always found really funny. They were so embarrassed, but they were wonderful and they've always been a great company. But I always thought that was funny. Um, so in my relationships, it really doesn't affect my relationships very much, to be honest. One of the reasons for that is that I have radical honesty about what's going on with me at this point. I just tell people, and I don't make my needs a question. They're a
mm,
statement. Like, hey, so my friend who's ADHD, for instance, we have radical honesty with one another when it comes to these things and radical disclosure. And I will tell her, I love her little what I call Candyland version of thinking, because like this weavy, windy, colorful little storytelling way of telling you things, right? But when I'm manic, I can't stay with that. I can't. My brain can't stay with her on that. And so I'll tell her, I'll say, I'm manic, I need you to make a point. And she goes,
wow. Okay.
okay. Because she knows the rest of the time I'm cool with it. And during the depressive and baseline phases, I love that. I am all on board with that. So, but at that point, I need her to accommodate me. So I
Yep.
just tell her, I am manic. So in other words, it's me, not you, and I need you to make a point. And before the first time I ever said this to her, I explained why.
Mhm.
I let her know. I explained to her what was happening with me so that she understood. I do that when I give speeches. I'll go in. I am in front of a bunch of strangers, right? And I'm like, hey, everyone, you may notice I'm talking 90 to nothing. If I start talking too fast for you, please raise your hand. I am having a manic phase today. Here we go. If I'm having an OCD moment with something, I talk about it. I
Mm.
have mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS, which is an autoimmune disorder. And if I have a lot of inflammation that day, I will just tell people, you know, uh, don't hug me because just about anything you do is going to hurt. These kinds of things. And I just am very honest and direct about it. And so it doesn't negatively affect my relationships. And I never stop going out and doing things. I'd never let whatever is going on with me.
Great. I'm
Yeah,
so
I
happy. And I mean, really, that's pretty easy, right? To just say, this is what's going on. This is why. I love that you
yeah,
use it in all your talks because people must absolutely resonate with that so much.
they do. I get a lot of people that come up and talk to me about it. It's funny.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think
I,
there
I
are a
like,
lot of unspoken things, right? We just don't talk about
yeah.
them. And you're very
Yeah.
openly talking about them and setting boundaries at the same time. So people have got to be like, wait, I need
And
that in my life.
it's so effective. It's
Yes.
so effective. And when you what's interesting is if you start it, other people start doing it too. So now
Yep.
I have people in my life that never did that before, that now, because I did it and my husband now does it and a couple other people, now other people are doing the same thing. And my mother always had radical disclosure. My father
Mm.
always had that. And they have two very different medical histories, but let me just put it this way, it's not surprising that I have 8 disabilities given the 2 humans that I came from.
Okay.
Um, but they always did the same thing. Like, this is the need that I'm having. This is what I'm going through. This is,
I love that.
um, and it was really cool. And they did it a little less at work than what I do for good reason because it was a different setting, and I understand that. It was also a different time for them when I was young and they were going through that. But they were always very good, especially with family and friends, about that. And I think normalizing just saying your need not as a question but as a statement, and is responding with, okay, like, this isn't a rejection, this person has a need, how can I help you?
Mhm.
When we have that kind of dialogue, it gives so much grace, and it again brings us into like the higher points of Maslow's hierarchy, the stages
Yep.
of wellness, basically. And it makes life better quality, right? It really does. So it doesn't hurt that. You asked about the parenting journey. So
Yes.
um my sister was actually my first step into that, believe it. So first of all, I thought she was my baby when she came.
As
They
one
told me
does at
about her,
10.
as one
Yeah.
does. They told me about her on my ninth birthday. I was ecstatic. And when she came, I thought that meant she was mine because she had been my ninth birthday present. So she was therefore my personal baby. And I treated her as such. Everybody still talks about, I would get up at night with her. I would do all these things, right? And then I actually had the privilege. My father at one point was away working out of the area, and because he just gotten a new job. my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia. I was
Oh,
just out of high school at this point. I was 18 years old, just out of high school. They told me she was dying. She looked at them and said, no, she wasn't. Came home 2 months later on my birthday, for the record. But um, and she had to be out of the city even for this. And so I got my sister. And like there was even like some stuff signed and all. It was a whole thing. And so that I could go take her to school, and I could do different things with her at school and all that. So I had my sister. I had this scared, frustrated little 8-year-old girl and myself and 2 dogs. And and then also my mother who was sick, right? And then even when she came home, now I had the sick lady and the kid, right? And it was an interesting experience at such a young age, right? It was
yeah.
such a cool, fascinating experience. My sister and I are still have a very unusual relationship to this day that's almost more mother-daughter, but then also sisterly at the same point. It's kind of unique. Um, and then I also at different points have had my niece and nephew for short stints due to some issues there. But I am not biologically a mother because I had 6 miscarriages. One
Oh
of
my
the
gosh.
former disabilities that I used to have was that my uterus was so jacked up. Like there's not a nicer way to say it. Just
Mhm.
and everything attached to it. Like I finally got somebody to agree to take it out, and they did. Um, it was just lined with tumors, right? Like like the tubes were just tumors. It was just that's all
Oh,
there was. This I had cysts as big as like that covered half of my ovaries. There were polyps inside the uterus. I had endometriosis and adenomyosis, despite having been told for years that I had neither, by the way. Uh, um, so it was just defunct, and I had horrible issues. And we tried every birth control. People go, "Why didn't you try birth control?" I tried. That man in the other room is so fertile, y'all. It is unreal. Like they need to write books about him or something. Like
I-
it used to baffle my doctors. He beat the depot shot. Okay. He beat the pill. He beat everything. Like it just
yeah.
there was no nothing to be done about this. Um and so I am not a mother from a biological sense, and I'm okay with it. You know what's funny is you think that like the one thing I always thought I would have kids and not be married, which is a weird thing to think when you're young, but I did. And you would think that then that being gone would just be devastating, right? And there was sadness, especially when the miscarriages happened. Like at the time,
Yeah.
right? It sucked. It was not fun. And but um, you would think it would be worse than it was, but I actually hit a point, and I have remarkable people. Like half of my family doesn't have kids on one side, right? So I had tons of representation of what your life can be without children.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had hit a point, and I didn't even realize it until at one point somebody asked me, and I was like, I don't even want kids anymore. And I hadn't realized that this had happened. I had not consciously processed, oh, I no longer want children. I just suddenly realized I don't want my life to change. I like it as it is. I love what I'm be able to do with my business. I love the quiet. I love I love my selfish time with my husband. I love being able to foster all these animals, which the special cases that we take in, I would never take in with children because we take in like abuse cases and stuff
Hmm.
like that and kind of emotionally rehab them. And I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do those things. Right. I even got an opportunity to volunteer with at a big cat sanctuary and like actually interact physically with like lions and tigers and a hyena and stuff. And I wouldn't do that if I had a kid at home. I wouldn't put my, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't do that. So it was, it's a cool realization, and it's been different, and it's been interesting, but it was worth it to have the hysterectomy. Nothing will ever make me
Hmm.
regret that.
I had one also, and I had a lot of
uh,
but I didn't realize you realize how much issue it's causing But still, when it came out, I was surprised. Like, I hadn't felt that good since I was
Yes.
15,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
I was like,
Like you
wow,
start
I
to
felt
realize,
really bad all the time.
yeah, you
It's
start
crazy
to
that you
realize,
even got pregnant with the issues that you had. Like,
I know.
aside from birth control and getting past the birth control barrier, like on your own with no birth control, it's shocking
Yeah.
to even have
Yeah.
conceived. So I'm so grateful that you shared that story. And
Sure.
yeah, my heart feels that for you as someone who's had
Thanks.
miscarriages. And I
Sucks.
love you're moving forward because as childless parents and your
Mhm.
relationship with your husband and your relationship with work and the world around you, it has to shift. You were already so geared that way though, like, oh, here's this problem, let's figure out what the bonuses are, like, so for you, you're like, 6 marriages, can't have kids, let's figure out what the good parts are
Six
about
miscarriages. Yeah, you said
six
marriages.
miscarriages, sorry, miscarriages, sorry. But
That
yeah,
would be so funny.
I mean, that's another podcast interview.
That's another
Um,
podcast altogether.
but with all those miscarriages and not thinking that you're going to have children, then you
Yeah.
can't. And then wanting to have the hysterectomy, obviously. And then being like, wait, I don't really even want to. And recognizing that whole process is really
It's
huge
interesting.
because a lot of people struggle so much with the infertility that they don't know how to move on in their lives. And I just love how you've moved through everything. I have the link to your website, and your book because I went and found that to get that. What I want to wrap up. I mean, we've had so many high notes. It's hard to like, let's wrap up with something positive because we have. The whole thing's been positive. I guess what would you tell someone else struggling in similar situations as you
Yeah.
who haven't figured out the benefits of what they've been labeled with?
Right. Yeah. I get that all the time actually. I get asked about that a
I
lot. And
bet.
I do, yeah. Um, first of all, give yourself some grace. And it's okay to struggle with something. It's okay to take a minute with it, right? And
Yeah.
the truth is that society, the world, has not been designed for people who have physical differences, neuro differences, anything like that, chromosomal differences. It's not been designed for those humans. Now that's starting to change. There's a lot more accommodations out now. They're free. Get out there and check them out, look them up. In fact, I have a charity that I just started called the Neuroverse. And if you go to join the neuroverse.org, you can, there's a list of resources that can start you off on the accommodation journey. So start learning to take care of yourself, start looking up that research, like the Johns Hopkins, look up like Johns Hopkins and disability, Johns Hopkins and neurodiversity and stuff, and look up and realize that you've got some cool stuff going on too. And so, yeah, there's this stuff that sucks. And even though the world's not designed for you, and that's part of the problem, sometimes some of this just sucks, right? Um, and but that there's also good stuff with it too. And steer into those things and learn to accommodate the things that suck and communicate radically with people. Just tell them what's up. And if your child is the one that's going through this, listen to how they communicate, watch how they communicate because they are trying to tell you, they just don't have the vocabulary to do it. And then my final thing is figure out your superpowers.
Mm.
Write them down and just steer into them. Start every single thing that you do, run towards those superpowers, use those superpowers. Like you gave the example of the guy on the show saying, just let me do this is what my ADHD is like the thing, right? Steer into those superpowers,
Mm.
whatever it is that you have as a human being that makes you amazing and makes you unique. Steer into that and help your child do the exact same thing.
I loved having you on. You're so fun to talk to. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer.